The evening was quiet in the suburban neighborhood, with the sun beginning to dip below the horizon and the street slowly filling with the soft hum of traffic and distant voices of children finishing their day. People were closing windows, walking their dogs, and preparing dinner, unaware that an event was about to shatter the calm in a single instant. In one particular street, two identical cars sat parked on opposite sides, their owners finishing their daily routines. In one of those cars, a man was finishing a call, laughing softly at something someone had said on the other end. He had the kind of presence that drew no attention unless he wanted it. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was simply living his life, going about his evening like any other person in the neighborhood. But life sometimes has cruel timing, and fate was about to turn the ordinary into chaos. A few blocks away, a police unit received a call reporting a possible suspicious vehicle in the area. The details were vague, but the officers, driven by years of training to respond quickly, immediately headed in the direction of the report. They were aware of rising tensions in other neighborhoods, so their minds were already primed to anticipate danger, even if the streets looked calm. As the police cruiser approached, the man in the car noticed the flashing lights in the rearview mirror. He was confused, but he didn't panic. Pulling to the side, he raised his hand slightly, signaling that he would cooperate. The officers, however, misread the situation. Their nerves were already frayed, and the tension from prior incidents clouded their judgment. A sudden movement, nothing more than adjusting in his seat, triggered a tragic misunderstanding. Without clear warning, the officers fired their weapons. The sound of gunshots shattered the stillness of the evening. Neighbors rushed to their windows, screaming and calling out as the man slumped in the driver's seat. Chaos erupted instantly. Sirens blared, tires screeched, and the once quiet street became a scene of confusion and horror. The neighbors, many of whom had lived on the street for years, could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The man's identical twin, who had been in a nearby store picking up groceries, received a frantic call moments later. His heart sank as he learned the unthinkable. His brother had been shot. The twin immediately left the store, dropping his bags and running down the street, his mind racing with disbelief and fear. He arrived at the scene to find his brother barely conscious, surrounded by the chaos of flashing lights, shouting officers, and neighbors trying to help. Panic threatened to take over, but he forced himself to stay calm, kneeling beside his brother and checking for signs of life. Every instinct screamed to act, yet he had to stay measured. Too much panic could make things worse. People in the street were calling for medical help, some filming on their phones, others shouting at the officers to explain what had happened. But the officers were tense and defensive, their adrenaline high and their focus entirely on containing the scene rather than offering comfort or explanation. The twins' eyes met the faces of the men who had fired, confusion and grief mirrored in his expression. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, and in that instant, a part of him that had been trained for danger long ago stirred quietly beneath the surface. The crowd continued to grow, neighbors coming out to see what had happened, some angry, some in tears, some in shock. Everyone wanted answers, but the answers weren't coming fast enough. Paramedics arrived, moving swiftly to tend to the man who had been shot. He was rushed to the ambulance, and the twin followed closely behind, every step heavy with the burden of fear and hope mixed together. He couldn't believe this was happening, couldn't fathom that a routine evening could spiral into such tragedy in mere moments. In the hospital, the twin paced the hallways, his mind replaying the events over and over. How could this happen? Why was his brother shot in the first place? He knew his brother was careful, respectful, and law-abiding. Yet here they were, facing the consequences of someone else's hasty decision. Every detail he remembered about the evening, the quiet street, the casual gestures, the harmless movements, felt now like a fragile thread that had been severed abruptly. Throughout the ordeal, he stayed by his brother's side, silent but vigilant. The doctors worked tirelessly, explaining the injuries, the treatments, the fragile balance between life and death. Each moment felt stretched, the world outside moving quickly while the twin existed in a bubble of tension and fear. He noticed the officers lingering outside the emergency room, their expressions unreadable, perhaps realizing the gravity of their mistake, perhaps already preparing for the narratives that would follow. Amidst the hospital chaos, the twins' thoughts turned inward. He recalled past missions, past moments when his skills had been tested under life or death conditions. Though he had left that life behind, the instincts and training never left him. They guided his movements, his decisions, his calm in the storm. While everyone else saw a grieving brother, they didn't see the quiet intensity that ran through him, the calculated mind that had once navigated countless dangerous operations. Now it wasn't a battlefield overseas, it was a personal crisis, and the stakes were deeply, painfully human. Outside, the community responded in its own ways. Neighbors shared what little they knew on social media. Local news channels began covering the story, and a debate quickly ignited about the incident. People were furious, confused, and saddened. Questions were raised about police training, accountability, and the tragic consequences of rushed judgments. Yet for the twin, the world had narrowed to a single point. The man lying in the hospital bed, his life hanging in the balance. As the night stretched on, the twin stayed close, refusing to leave even for a moment. He watched over his brother, silently willing him to hold on, to fight through the pain and to survive. His presence was steady, unwavering, a calm amidst the storm. He spoke softly to his brother, words of reassurance and determination, even as his own heart ached with helplessness. This was no longer just an incident reported in passing. It was a personal tragedy that had brought to the surface years of skill, courage, and resilience that few could imagine. Hours passed like minutes. The twin observed the hospital staff, the officers, the neighbors, and the press, all circling around the same story but each seeing it differently. For him it was the intimate reality of fear, grief, and love. Every sound, every movement, every expression carried weight. He remained acutely aware of the world outside, yet entirely focused on the life before him. And in that focus, a quiet determination began to grow. The tragedy had struck without warning, but the twin understood that it was not only about survival, it was about uncovering the truth, understanding what had happened, and making sure such a mistake never happened again. By the time the first rays of dawn began to creep through the hospital windows, the twin was exhausted but resolute. The night had been long, filled with sorrow, confusion, and tension, yet it had also awakened something deep within him, a reminder of who he was, the skills he possessed, and the responsibility he felt not just to his brother, but to justice and accountability. The community, the officers, and even the world outside were now part of a story that had turned from ordinary life to extraordinary tragedy in a single evening. And while no one else knew it yet, the quiet, grieving man who had paced the hospital corridors and held his brother's hand through the long, dark night was not just a twin in grief. He was someone who had faced danger in ways the world could hardly imagine, and the events of this night were about to awaken a force that no one would see coming. The calm, human, and emotional heart of the story had set the stage for what would follow, an unfolding tale of truth, skill, and justice that would leave everyone involved stunned, forever changed by the night when a quiet street and a mistaken identity became the catalyst for a story far greater than anyone could have imagined. The day after the shooting, the neighborhood was quiet again, but it felt different. People walked slowly, whispering to each other, their eyes darting toward the house where the tragedy had struck. The twin remained at the hospital, refusing to leave, and spent hours listening to the doctors, learning every detail about his brother's condition. Each update was a mixture of relief and anxiety. The wound was serious, but his brother's strength and will to survive were remarkable. Still, the twin knew that surviving was only the beginning. Understanding what had happened and why was the next challenge. At home, memories of their childhood came flooding back. The twins had always been close, sharing everything from small secrets to life-changing decisions. They had a bond that went beyond words, a connection that only twins could understand. His brother had always been careful, thoughtful, and patient, the kind of man who respected rules and avoided conflict. And yet, here he was, shot by people who were supposed to protect him. The thought burned inside him like fire. How could such a mistake happen? How could the world allow this to happen to someone so innocent? While sitting beside his brother, the twin thought about the family he had left behind when he joined the military. Years in elite units had taught him discipline, patience, and focus. Those lessons once useful. Our life or death missions overseas now seemed strangely relevant. The emotions he felt, anger, fear, grief, were dangerous, but he knew he had to control them. If he lost himself to rage, he might make mistakes that could cost more lives. Instead, He focused on gathering facts, observing every detail, every reaction, and every inconsistency in the reports he had received. News outlets began to cover the story more extensively. Cameras flashed as reporters questioned the officers, trying to get a coherent explanation. Some reports were inaccurate, painting a distorted picture of the events. Social media exploded with opinions, accusations, and confusion. Yet for the twin, the chaos outside was only background noise. He was not interested in blame alone. He wanted truth, a clear understanding of what had gone wrong and why. He started quietly asking questions, first of the paramedics, then the officers, then anyone who had witnessed the shooting. He listened carefully, piecing together small details that didn't quite add up. One witness said the man had not appeared threatening. Another mentioned that the officers hesitated before firing. These details, though minor, were crucial. To most people, they would seem trivial, but to him they were pieces of a puzzle he intended to solve. His brother, slowly recovering in the hospital bed, remained unconscious for much of the day. The twin kept talking to him anyway, narrating what was happening outside, the people coming in and out, the news reports, the small acts of kindness from nurses and visitors. It was a way to stay connected, to provide comfort, and to remind his brother that he was not alone. It was also a way for him to stay grounded, to channel his anxiety into something constructive. As the hours passed, he began to notice discrepancies in the police reports. Names were missing, timelines conflicted, and certain details were suspiciously vague. It was clear that the narrative being presented to the public was incomplete, possibly intentionally so. The twins' military training had taught him to notice patterns, to detect anomalies, and to question information that didn't match reality. He realized that what appeared to be a random tragedy might actually be the result of negligence, or worse, deliberate concealment. Determined to get answers, he started making discreet calls to people he trusted, former colleagues from his military days who were familiar with investigation, intelligence, and strategy. He wasn't looking to escalate the situation violently. That was not his goal. Instead, he wanted information, clarity, and accountability. Every call, every conversation, brought him closer to understanding the sequence of events that had led to his brother being shot. By evening, the twin had compiled a list of inconsistencies, witnesses, and potential sources of truth. He felt a calm clarity that only came when he focused on the problem, detached from emotion, fully engaged in the mission of uncovering reality. He also realized that this calm clarity would be tested in ways he could not yet imagine. The neighborhood had settled into uneasy silence, but forces within the police department were already reacting, some defensively, some anxiously. Rumors of internal investigations circulated, though no one could confirm anything. The twin understood that patience and strategy were his allies. Acting rashly could compromise not only the truth but also the safety of those he cared about. Late that night, he sat in the hospital cafeteria, reviewing the information he had gathered. His thoughts were methodical. He reconstructed the timeline, noting each decision, each movement, and each action by the officers and witnesses. He could see where errors had occurred, where judgment had failed, and where caution had been abandoned. It was meticulous work, but it was necessary. The twins' experience in complex operations had taught him that even small mistakes could have massive consequences. And here in real life, the stakes were heartbreakingly high. Meanwhile, his brother began to stir, groaning softly as consciousness returned. Relief washed over the twin, but he didn't let it distract him. He stayed at his brother's side, helping him adjust, ensuring he understood what had happened in the hours he had been unconscious. He explained slowly, gently, what he had discovered so far, framing it in a way that would not cause panic or additional stress. His brother listened, a mix of confusion and trust in his twin's voice. Despite the pain, there was a shared understanding between them, a bond forged not only by blood but by the trust that comes from knowing someone has your back in the most dangerous situations. The twin also considered the community around them. The neighbors, some still frightened, others angry, all needed reassurance that the situation was being addressed responsibly. He recognized the importance of perception and narrative, understanding that the story told to the public could influence everything from accountability to safety. He began quietly strategizing how to present the truth, to ensure the facts were clear, even in a highly charged and emotional environment. It was not just about his brother. It was about setting things right for everyone affected. In the early hours of the morning, the twin finally stepped outside, breathing deeply, observing the streets bathed in dim light. It was a moment of reflection. He remembered all the missions, the training, the risks he had faced in his military career. But this was different. There were no enemies from abroad, no planned attacks, no battlefields. This was personal. This was home. And it was here, in the quiet tension of the suburban streets, that he realized how fragile life could be and how quickly it could be upended by misunderstanding and fear. With the first hints of sunrise, he returned to the hospital, determined to be ready for whatever came next. He had gathered information, he had analyzed patterns, and he had prepared a plan, not one born of anger or revenge, but of careful strategy and intelligence. The community, the officers, and the world outside had begun to see the incident as a tragic accident. But he knew the full story ran deeper. Mistakes had been made, and accountability had to follow. Through the long day, he maintained a delicate balance between presence and patience, grief and control. Every word, every glance, every movement was intentional. The twins' quiet resolve, shaped by years of discipline, was now applied in an entirely new context. He was no longer on a military mission abroad, but he was navigating a battlefield of misinformation, fear, and bureaucratic obstacles. And though the street seemed calm, the undercurrent of tension suggested that the story was far from over. By evening, the twin had outlined a clear understanding of the events, ready to share it with those who could effect change. He knew he would face resistance, skepticism, and perhaps hostility, but he was prepared. This was not just about his brother's survival anymore. It was about truth, justice, and ensuring that such a tragedy would not happen to anyone else. He understood that courage was not only physical, it was also emotional, moral, and strategic. As he sat beside his brother once more, watching him rest, the twin felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. But unlike the panic of the previous night, this weight brought clarity, not confusion. He had a mission, and while it was different from anything he had faced before, it required the same focus, discipline, and courage that had defined his life. And in that quiet hospital room, surrounded by the soft sounds of monitors and distant footsteps, he made a silent promise. He would uncover the truth, protect his family, and bring accountability to those who had caused irreparable harm. The community may not have realized it yet, and the officers may have thought the story would fade, but the twins' resolve was unwavering. The next chapters of this story were about to unfold, and when they did, no one would doubt the presence of a carefully calculated, highly trained mind working to ensure justice not through anger, but through precision, insight, and unshakable determination. Days passed, and the hospital became a temporary base for the twin. He stayed close to his brother, observing every detail and speaking quietly to him, knowing that even small conversations could aid in recovery. While most people would focus only on the visible wound, he was attentive to the subtle signs, the color of the skin, the rise and fall of the chest, the slight shifts in expression. He knew that survival was not just a matter of treatment. It required vigilance, patience, and careful observation. Outside the hospital, the world continued, but the twins' focus narrowed. He had a clear objective: to uncover the full truth behind the shooting. His military experience taught him that understanding an incident meant collecting evidence, cross-checking information, and analyzing behavior. He began mapping out the events of that night, reconstructing the moments leading to the shooting. Every witness statement, every police report, and every media clip was scrutinized. Nothing could be taken at face value. He contacted people he trusted from his past, skilled in intelligence, investigation, and tactical analysis. These calls were discreet, careful, and strategic. He was not looking for confrontation yet. He needed data. Each conversation added a layer to his understanding. He began to see patterns, connections that others overlooked. Small errors, inconsistencies, and omissions revealed the extent of the negligence that led to his brother's injury. He realized that the shooting was not just a random mistake. It was a consequence of a series of flawed decisions. At the hospital, he remained calm and composed, even when officers or administrators tried to explain the incident superficially. He listened, asked questions, and noted contradictions. His demeanor was measured, his questions precise, leaving little room for deception. The officers noticed his presence, quiet yet unwavering, a constant reminder that someone was watching closely. They could sense that he was not just a grieving brother. There was something deeper in his gaze, a quiet intensity that hinted at experience and capability, far beyond ordinary civilians. The twin also began to interact with neighbors and witnesses. He listened to their accounts, recording details in his mind with remarkable clarity. Their observations, though informal, were crucial. He pieced together timelines, noting small gaps and discrepancies. Some witnesses mentioned hearing hesitation before the shots. Others described movements that didn't match the official narrative. Each detail, no matter how minor, was a clue. His mind worked tirelessly, connecting dots and forming a clearer picture of the tragic night. Late at night, when the hospital corridors were quiet, the twin reviewed the collected information. He spread notes across a table, creating a detailed map of events. Arrows, timelines, and observations formed a web that revealed more than anyone realized. It became apparent that the situation had escalated due to miscommunication, fear, and poor judgment. But there were deeper questions that needed answers. Why had certain officers acted without waiting for verification? Were there internal pressures or biases that influenced their decisions? The twin knew that uncovering these truths required patience and strategic thinking. During this period, he also focused on his brother's recovery. He maintained routines, encouraged physical therapy, and ensured that the emotional impact of the incident was addressed. Talking to him, keeping him engaged, and quietly guiding his thoughts helped stabilize both of them. The bond between the twins deepened as they faced the trauma together. The brother, gradually regaining strength, looked to the twin for reassurance and clarity, sensing that his siblings' control and intelligence would navigate them through the aftermath. As the twin continued his investigation, he became increasingly aware of the media's role in shaping public perception. Reporters and social media users were quick to pass judgment, often misrepresenting facts. He understood that misinformation could affect accountability and the outcome of any internal review. He started drafting a plan to document evidence clearly, ensuring that his findings would be undeniable. Accuracy, clarity, and methodical presentation became his priorities. He also considered the broader implications. The incident highlighted flaws in training, response protocols, and communication within the police force. He realized that while his immediate concern was justice for his brother, addressing these systemic issues could prevent future tragedies. This awareness fueled his focus, giving him purpose beyond personal grief. In addition to formal evidence, he observed human behavior carefully. Officers' body language, hesitant glances, and careful word choices provided insights that written reports did not. Witnesses' emotions, recollections, and reactions added context. The twin applied the same analytical approach that he had used in high-stakes operations, understanding that human behavior often reveals truths that paperwork obscures. By midweek, the twin had gathered enough information to identify key inconsistencies and responsible parties. He was ready to approach certain individuals directly, not with aggression but with authority and evidence. He understood that confrontation required strategy, timing, and leverage. Acting impulsively could lead to obstruction, retaliation, or further mistakes. His approach was deliberate, calculated, and controlled. During this time, he reflected on the nature of justice and accountability. He considered the fragility of human life, the randomness of tragedy, and the weight of responsibility. His military background taught him that preparation, patience, and discipline were essential in any critical situation. He applied those lessons now, blending personal grief with strategic insight, creating a unique perspective that few could match. Meanwhile, his brother's condition steadily improved. Each sign of progress reinforced the twins' determination. The physical recovery was important, but so was emotional stabilization. He guided his brother through the process, offering reassurance, clarity, and support. They shared quiet moments of conversation, recalling childhood memories and discussing hopes for the future. These moments, though small, were vital for maintaining resilience amidst ongoing tension. As the twin continued his meticulous work, he began to anticipate potential obstacles. Resistance from within the department, skepticism from officials, and misinterpretation by the media were all likely. He planned for these contingencies, considering multiple scenarios and responses. Every move was calculated, every step intentional. The twins' ability to stay several moves ahead created a sense of control that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the initial shooting. One evening, he met discreetly with a former colleague who had expertise in investigations and tactical analysis. Together, they reviewed the evidence, identified patterns, and considered next steps. Their conversation was precise, professional, and focused. It was a reminder that while personal emotions were strong, strategic collaboration and rational thought were essential for achieving meaningful outcomes. By the weekend, the twin had a clear understanding of the series of errors and decisions that led to the shooting. He knew which officers' actions required accountability and which systemic flaws needed to be addressed. He also recognized that timing was critical. Presenting information too soon or too late could undermine credibility and impact. Patience, precision, and careful sequencing of actions were as important now as they had been during any mission he had led. Throughout this process, he maintained a balance between external investigation and internal support. Caring for his brother, engaging with witnesses, and managing strategic planning required constant focus. The twins' ability to operate in multiple dimensions simultaneously was a testament to his training, experience, and innate discipline. He moved seamlessly between personal care, analytical work, and tactical planning, demonstrating resilience and adaptability under pressure. In the final days of Part 3, the twin prepared for the next phase, confrontation with those responsible. Armed with evidence, insight, and strategy, he was ready to move from observation and analysis to action. He remained calm, methodical, and deliberate, understanding that the effectiveness of his next steps depended on timing, clarity, and precision. His focus on justice, accountability, and truth drove every decision, every movement, and every interaction. While the hospital halls were quieter now, and his brother rested more peacefully, the twins' mind was fully engaged. The groundwork had been laid, the evidence collected, and the strategy formed. What had started as a personal tragedy was evolving into a complex mission of accountability and justice. The community officers and broader public would soon see the consequences of negligence, the impact of errors, and the unwavering resolve of a man who combined personal grief with extraordinary skill. As he sat beside his brother one last time before leaving the hospital for the evening, he reflected on the journey so far. The incident had revealed human fragility, institutional flaws, and the need for careful, deliberate action. But it had also demonstrated resilience, intelligence, and determination. The twins' resolve, honed through years of training and life experience, was now focused entirely on restoring justice, protecting his family, and exposing the truth. And though the story was far from over, the foundation had been set for the actions that would follow, actions that would leave a lasting impact on everyone involved. The days following the careful investigation brought clarity to the twins' mind. He had pieced together a thorough understanding of what had gone wrong, but knowing the truth was only half of what needed to be done. Accountability required action, and he knew he had to confront those responsible, not with anger alone, but with precision and strategy. He spent hours planning each step, considering the psychological, tactical, and emotional dimensions. Every move had to be calculated to ensure the truth would prevail. The first step involved identifying the key individuals involved in the shooting. Some officers had acted recklessly, some had failed to communicate properly, and others had contributed indirectly through negligence or poor judgment. The twin mapped each person's role, understanding motivations, weaknesses, and possible reactions. His military background gave him the advantage of analyzing human behavior, predicting responses, and planning contingencies. He prepared to use this knowledge not for violence, but to ensure the truth would be revealed clearly and irrefutably. Before any confrontation, he focused on gathering incontrovertible evidence. He compiled witness statements, video footage, and inconsistencies from official reports into a coherent package. Each detail was checked and cross-verified, leaving no room for denial. He understood that the strength of his position depended on facts, clarity, and unassailable logic. Emotions alone would not be enough. The evidence had to tell the story better than any argument could. Meanwhile, his brother's recovery progressed steadily. The twin remained close, guiding his physical therapy, monitoring progress, and encouraging mental resilience. He understood that his brother's emotional state was as important as his physical health. The bond between them grew even stronger, built on shared trust, understanding, and the quiet knowledge that they had faced danger together, in different forms, for a lifetime. When the twin began the initial confrontations, he chose his approach carefully. He met with certain officers discreetly, presenting the evidence calmly and logically. His demeanor was controlled, his voice steady, and his words deliberate. He allowed the facts to speak for themselves, highlighting errors, omissions, and negligence. The reactions varied. Some were defensive, some dismissive, and some quietly concerned. He observed each response with a trained eye, noting inconsistencies and gauging the sincerity of their words. The twin also considered the broader implications of the situation. Public trust, media narratives, and institutional accountability were all intertwined with the personal tragedy he had endured. Every step he took needed to reinforce truth and transparency, not just for his brother's sake, but for the community and future potential victims. His strategy was meticulous, balancing direct confrontation with measured diplomacy, ensuring that each interaction advanced the goal of justice. Simultaneously, he engaged with the community and witnesses, ensuring their accounts were recorded and preserved accurately. Many had witnessed the shooting but feared retaliation or had been intimidated by authority. The twin provided reassurance, explaining the importance of truth, clarity, and collective responsibility. He encouraged witnesses to document their experiences, creating a network of verified accounts that strengthened the overall narrative. This was not only about exposing mistakes. It was about creating a system that could not be ignored or dismissed. As the twin continued, he noticed subtle resistance from within the department. Some officers tried to obscure details, delay investigations, or manipulate reports. He anticipated these moves, countering them through careful planning, clear evidence, and the support of credible witnesses. He approached each obstacle as a tactical challenge, applying the same analytical rigor and problem-solving skills that had once guided him through hostile territories and complex operations abroad. By midweek, the twin orchestrated a critical meeting with higher-ranking officials. He presented the compiled evidence, highlighting the chain of errors and decisions that led to the shooting. He spoke calmly but firmly, his words precise and unambiguous. The presentation left little room for argument. His reputation, skills, and composure gave weight to every point he made. He demanded accountability not as an act of vengeance, but as a measure of justice, transparency, and prevention for the future. The response was a mixture of acknowledgement, discomfort, and reflection. Some officials recognized the gravity of the mistakes and committed to thorough investigations and corrective measures. Others were cautious, wary of potential consequences or public scrutiny. The twin remained unshaken, understanding that the process of reform would require patience, persistence, and consistent pressure. He had learned from experience that lasting change often involved navigating complex human and institutional dynamics with intelligence, strategy, and resilience. While managing these confrontations, he maintained focus on his brother's well-being. The hospital remained a sanctuary where they could discuss strategy, recovery, and the emotional impact of the incident. Quiet conversations, small acts of care, and shared reflection provided stability amidst the turbulence outside. The twins' presence offered reassurance, not just physically but psychologically, reinforcing the sense of safety and trust that had been fractured by the shooting. The community's response became increasingly significant. Neighbors, initially shocked and fearful, began to express support and demand transparency. The twins' methodical approach inspired confidence, demonstrating that accountability could be pursued without chaos or violence. Local media began reporting more accurately, guided in part by verified witness statements and clear evidence provided by the twin. The narrative began to shift from confusion and blame to clarity and truth. Throughout this period, the twin remained vigilant against manipulation or obstruction. He understood that some might attempt to redirect attention, distort facts, or discredit witnesses. He anticipated these challenges, preparing countermeasures grounded in solid evidence, strategic timing, and persuasive clarity. Each interaction was calculated, reinforcing the broader objective, to ensure that the incident was addressed fully, truthfully, and responsibly. In the evenings, the twin reflected on the journey so far. The shooting had been a tragic, senseless event, but it had also revealed the strength, resilience, and intelligence that defined him. He recognized that true justice required more than anger. It required discipline, strategy, and unwavering commitment. The emotional turmoil, while intense, became a tool rather than a hindrance, sharpening his focus and reinforcing his determination. By the weekend, he had achieved several key milestones. Witness accounts had been secured, critical inconsistencies in reports had been exposed, and higher-ranking officials had acknowledged the necessity of corrective action. The twins' measured, methodical approach had begun to shift the balance of power, ensuring that accountability could not be ignored or evaded. The community began to feel the impact of these efforts, gaining trust that the truth would not be buried or distorted. Even as he approached these victories, the twin remained aware that the work was ongoing. Systemic changes, institutional reforms, and long-term accountability would require sustained effort. He continued to monitor developments, communicate with witnesses, and support his brother, balancing multiple responsibilities with precision and calm. His strategic thinking, patience, and discipline became a model for navigating complex challenges in a humane and effective way. In the final days of Part 4, the twin stood quietly outside the hospital, observing the world around him. He thought about the journey from chaos to clarity, from tragedy to accountability. The shooting had revealed human frailty, institutional flaws, and the profound impact of fear and haste. Yet it had also showcased resilience, intelligence, and the capacity for disciplined action in the face of emotional and moral challenges. The twins' presence, skills, and commitment had transformed a personal tragedy into a catalyst for truth, justice, and meaningful change. As he returned to his brother's side, he reflected on the next phase of their journey. The confrontation had been successful in exposing mistakes and initiating accountability, but the broader implications remained. Systemic reform, continued vigilance, and ongoing advocacy for truth would define the coming weeks and months. The twin understood that his role was not finished. It had evolved. He was now both protector and strategist, guardian and advocate, blending personal care with tactical insight to shape outcomes and preserve justice. Within the hospital room, quiet confidence replaced earlier tension. His brother, steadily recovering, sensed the twins' resolve and expertise. Together they began to navigate the next steps, understanding that healing, justice, and reform were intertwined. Each decision, each conversation, and each action would contribute to a narrative that ensured mistakes were addressed. Accountability was enforced, and the community was empowered. The twins' reflection extended beyond immediate events. He considered the ripple effects of the incident, the lessons learned, and the enduring need for vigilance. Fear and tragedy had sparked a process of insight and action, demonstrating that even in the darkest moments, human intelligence, discipline, and compassion could prevail. The stage was set for the final chapter of the story, where the culmination of strategy, evidence, and courage would define the ultimate resolution and legacy of this harrowing incident. The final days of the investigation brought a sense of resolution, but they also reminded the twin that accountability and justice are never simple or immediate. Every meeting, every conversation, and every decision had consequences. The community, still shaken by the events, watched as the process unfolded with a mixture of hope, skepticism, and anticipation. The twin understood that the truth alone was not enough. It needed to be acted upon, understood, and accepted by all involved. With the evidence gathered, the twin worked closely with trusted advisors, strategizing how to present findings in a way that could not be ignored. He knew that mistakes had been made, but he also knew that institutions are often resistant to change. His military background provided him with the skills to navigate these challenges: planning, foresight, and the ability to anticipate human reactions. Every step was deliberate, aimed at achieving not just personal justice for his brother, but systemic reform to prevent similar tragedies in the future. His brother's condition had improved significantly. Each day brought a small victory: a stronger movement, clearer speech, more engagement with the world around him. The twins stayed close, supporting him not just physically but emotionally. They talked about the incident, about their shared history, and about what the future might hold. These conversations were therapeutic, helping both of them process the trauma while maintaining focus on the broader mission. The bond between them had deepened immeasurably, Forged in both grief and resilience, the twin began holding meetings with higher-ranking officials and internal investigators. He presented the evidence calmly and systematically, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Video footage, witness statements, and discrepancies in reports were laid out with precision. He did not raise his voice or express anger, but his presence alone carried authority. The officials could not ignore him. His reputation and skill lent weight to every point, and slowly acknowledgement turned into action. Investigations were opened, and officers responsible for negligence faced consequences. The twins' approach emphasized fairness and truth, not revenge. As the investigations progressed, the twin also engaged with the community. He spoke to neighbors, local leaders, and witnesses, explaining the process and reassuring them that justice was being pursued. Many people had been afraid to speak up or had felt powerless. His calm, methodical approach gave them confidence that truth and accountability could prevail. The community began to heal alongside his brother, inspired by the twins' determination and integrity. Through it all, the twin remained disciplined. He balanced care for his brother, community engagement, and the intricate task of overseeing the investigation. Each interaction was deliberate, every decision calculated to achieve maximum clarity and impact. He observed people closely, reading reactions, assessing honesty, and understanding intentions. His ability to navigate complex human dynamics, honed through years of military service, allowed him to manage a delicate situation with skill and poise. One afternoon, a key meeting with police leadership resulted in an unexpected breakthrough. Senior officials admitted failures in protocol, acknowledged negligence, and agreed to implement reforms. The twin listened carefully, ensuring that commitments were concrete, verifiable, and enforceable. This was more than a personal victory. It was a structural change that could prevent future tragedies. His methodical, patient approach had yielded tangible results, and he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his efforts extended beyond personal justice. At the hospital, he continued to support his brother, helping him regain independence and confidence. Simple tasks became milestones, walking unassisted, speaking clearly, remembering details of the day. Each achievement reinforced their sense of resilience. The twin provided guidance and encouragement, never underestimating the emotional toll of the incident. Together, they celebrated small victories while preparing for the long-term challenges that lay ahead. The twin also took time to reflect on the broader lessons of the incident. He understood the fragility of life, the consequences of fear and misjudgment, and the importance of clear communication. He considered the impact on the community, the police force, and the family. His approach combined emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and practical problem-solving. He recognized that justice was not just about assigning blame. It was about creating conditions that fostered accountability, safety, and trust. By the end of the week, systemic reforms were underway. Officers received retraining, policies were updated, and oversight mechanisms were strengthened. The twin monitored progress carefully, ensuring that commitments translated into action. The neighborhood began to regain a sense of security, and people expressed gratitude for his dedication and perseverance. His approach demonstrated that courage and intelligence, when combined with compassion and strategy, could create meaningful change. In the evenings, the twin and his brother would sit together, quietly discussing memories, hopes, and lessons learned. These moments of reflection reinforced their bond and helped them process the trauma. They spoke of resilience, integrity, and the importance of taking control of one's circumstances without letting fear dictate decisions. These conversations were grounding, reminding them both that even in the darkest times, human strength and connection could prevail. As weeks turned into months, the incident became a catalyst for broader awareness. Community programs emphasized the importance of accountability and responsible authority. Media coverage highlighted the twins' methodical approach, the courage of witnesses, and the lessons learned. The story evolved from tragedy to one of resilience, strategy, and the triumph of careful, deliberate action over chaos and fear. The twins' focus gradually shifted from immediate accountability to long-term vigilance. He continued to support reforms, mentor witnesses, and engage with the community. His presence remained a stabilizing force, a reminder that knowledge, discipline, and persistence could overcome fear and negligence. While the initial trauma could not be erased, the actions taken ensured that its consequences would be addressed meaningfully and responsibly. In the quiet moments, the twin reflected on the journey from that fateful night to the present. He considered the intersection of personal tragedy, institutional failure, and human resilience. He recognized that every decision he had made, every calculated step, and every moment of patience had contributed to a resolution that was both just and lasting. His brother, once at the center of chaos and danger, now recovered, shared in a sense of closure and hope for the future. Ultimately, the twins' actions left a lasting impact. The officers involved were held accountable, systemic reforms were implemented, and the community regained trust. The story of a tragic shooting transformed into a narrative of resilience, intelligence, and methodical action. The twin had navigated grief, fear, and complexity with clarity, demonstrating that justice could be pursued without chaos, and that careful strategy and moral courage could create lasting change. As he stood with his brother one final time in the hospital room, he reflected on the lessons of the ordeal. Life could change in an instant, but preparation, patience, and discipline allowed individuals to navigate even the most unexpected and challenging situations. The twins' resolve, skill, and humanity had ensured that a personal tragedy became a story of accountability, resilience, and hope. In the end, the incident had not only tested their courage and intelligence, but also demonstrated the enduring power of truth, strategy, and human connection.